Hey, party people, it's Jaime. Producing our podcast, Confessions of a Creative Director, is one of the most rewarding and fulfilling projects of my life. I can't believe I get to meet and talk to some of the most successful and influential creative directors from around the world. I'm thrilled by all the support and encouragement I receive from listeners everywhere. Now, as a fan of the show, I invite you to join my Patreon and become a supporter of the show. You'll help me cover the editing, hosting services, and maybe the occasional tequila soda for yours truly. If you've derived real-world value from my conversations with the world's best creatives, this is your way to help keep it going. Visit my Patreon and sign up to become a supporter today. You'll get access to additional content from the show and maybe even a few surprises. I'm looking forward to many more episodes, and I hope you'll come along for the ride with me. Visit patreon.com/confessions of a creative director to become a supporter today. That's patreon.com/confessions of a creative director. Thanks. This episode is brought to you by What's the Big Idea? An indispensable guide to becoming a kick-ass creative director by yours truly, Jaime Cabrera. Pick it up on Amazon and now available on Audible. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast, Confessions of a Creative Director, the original podcast made by a creative director for creative directors, for aspiring creative directors, for creatives of all types looking to up their game by learning from the world's best creatives. This is your podcast, and I am your host, Jaime Cabrera. On today's podcast, we have Chief Creative Officer of NVE Experience Agency, the talented Shelly Elkins. And Shelley is here with a big proclamation that brand experience, also known as experiential, has finally earned a seat at the big kids table, and that we've entered the era of marketing with experience at the center of the mix. Now, as someone who has worked in this world for many years and who has had his little heart broken by similar claims in the past, I was skeptical. But maybe, just maybe, after this conversation, Shelley has changed my mind. So without further ado, let's get into it with Shelly Elkins, Adweek Experiential Executive of the Year. How are you? Wait, I had a little thing here. Hold on. The studio audience is cheering for you. Take a bow. Take a bow. I haven't had a chance to use that little feature, so I thought I'd break it out here. Congratulations. That's a big fucking deal.
Thank you. It's a huge honor.
Yeah.
I appreciate the applause, too. There was not a live awards show. Now I feel fulfilled.
Yes, the live studio audience has validated your entire career. How did it feel? How did you find out? Is it like a, like when they award the Nobel Prize, you get a call in the middle of the night and somebody tells you that you've won this thing, or how does it happen?
It definitely happened in the middle of the night. No, they notify you. We with my former agency entered our agency as well as myself, and they reach out to you and let you know the news, and then you talk with them, and that's it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think it's really exciting that you won that, and we're going to get into your thoughts on experiential and probably discover why you won that award. So you and I have something in common. We're both Jack Morton alumnus. I think we were ships passing in the night. I was leaving in like 2012, and I think maybe you were coming in at that same time. Is that right?
I came in a few years later in 2016, so we missed each other.
Yeah. That would have been a lot of fun. We probably would have gotten into some trouble.
I think we would have gotten into some serious trouble.
But it was a great. I'm still so grateful to Jack Morton and have such a warm place in in my heart for them because they gave me my big break, and just what a great agency, and they've done so well, and they continue to be a leader in the in that space, in experiential and all kinds of stuff. And now you've kind of transitioned to I would say probably an equally big player in the experiential space, NVE. So tell us about your new role. Tell us all about the agency. Give us an insight into your big plan for the agency.
It is. It's a really exciting time to join NVE. It was not an easy decision to leave Jack. I'm with you. It's a great place that's continuing to do a ton of great work. But I left for NVE because they're really the future of the industry. They're independent, so the power of that independence and what it enables creatively is incredibly exciting. And I'm excited to be here and start the new year with a new agency.
Yeah. And I have some friends over there, and it seems to be a great group. I've had people from the agency on the show as well. It just seems to be like a really great shop. So congrats to you, and congrats to them for snagging you. So we're going to get into a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is experiential marketing. And you have a premise that this is the moment that experiential is finally going to come to the fore. It's going to have a seat at the table, and it's going to be what those of us in the business have always imagined it to be, which is kind of like at times maybe the lead discipline in a big campaign, right? Oftentimes it's sort of an afterthought, or it's kind of like, an extension. But your premise is that it is now the time for experiential marketing to make the biggest impact. So why don't we start with first how you define experiential marketing? Let's talk a little bit about that, because I'd love to hear how you see it.
Yeah. Quite simply, experiential marketing is brands doing versus talking, and brands engaging, often live, with their consumers and customers, instead of talking at them. I like to think about it that way. If advertising is brands talking, experiential is brands doing.
That's a really great way to think about it, right? We used to have at my old agency, we had this kind of moniker of, we make brands happen, right? It's kind of like making them come to life, as opposed to being sort of flat, two-dimensional ideas. They can become experiences. And I've wanted to work on developing sort of a universal definition for it. And one of the thoughts that I was thinking about was like, experiential is anything that involves more than two of the five senses, right? And it was kind of an interesting way to think about it, because experiential doesn't always have to be what has been considered experiential in the past, which is some kind of pop-up experience. It can be maybe a little bit different, right? So I've always tried to figure out what is the way that could really kind of make people's ears perk up, right? Is it about the five senses? Is it about anything that is more than the two typical, sight and sound? All of that can be experiential, or something like that.
I love that. I often also say that it's the feeling channel. There's that quote from Maya Angelou that people say a lot, reference a lot. If people will remember a little bit of what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And experiential does that. It makes people feel. It's sensory. It's immersive. So I love thinking about it through the senses. It's maybe at its best when it's engaging all of the senses. If I could be so bold.
Yeah, and I think some brands are doing it at another agency that I was at recently, RNC PMK. Their client, MasterCard, had developed, an album with the sonic branding that we had worked on creating some music videos for. But they also had a taste. They had like commissioned some chef to make them like a series of macaroons or something like that, which I thought was pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, if you think if anybody can nail, all five, it's kind of a cool thing. So, what is it that you think has made now the time for experiential to step forward? Was it the pandemic? Is it, millennials? What is the insight? What is the thing that gives you that thought that, okay, now's the time?
It's a combination of things, and definitely I'd say some of the things that you mentioned. It's the pandemic, and for sure, and people longing, quite simply, to be together. It's technology, which also, through the pandemic, we experienced by necessity digital overload. Overload. I almost said overlord.
Yeah.
The digital overlords.
The digital overlords. Yeah.
Digital overload, and being back with people doing real things continues to be so important. I think that just continues to be enhanced by things like AI. It's a counter to that, and then definitely the way consumers behave, what matters to them. The millennials, Gen Z have definitely made it be known that they value experiences over things. They'd
Yeah.
rather spend their money on experiences than on material things and on, things like putting away for the future. They want to live in the moment, live in the now. Experience does all of that.
Yeah, that's true. So, speaking of money, what kinds of, in my mind, it's like until clients start spending, a similar amount that they normally would spend on broadcast or some other channel, right? We're going to continue to sort of be the little channel, right, that could, but maybe isn't getting the funding. How do we shift that? How do we get more money allocated to experiential? I mean, do you agree with that fact that often experiential is not getting the same type of funding?
Yes and no. Experiential spend is on the rise. And, I feel from what I've seen, it's not just a recovery from the pandemic. I don't think it's just a comeback. I think it's starting to be a conquest. I think, I've seen that spend continues to increase. So, yes, but does it match more traditional channels yet? No. But more and more, the work that that people talk about, the things that we share and really care about, are experiential in nature, and so I think the tide is turning.
Yeah, and you're right, because I mean, just look at, you can just look at your LinkedIn feed or your Instagram feed or whatever, and the things that people are sharing are experiences, are real life activations. Not so much, obviously, that still happens, especially around Super Bowl time, right? Ads and things of that nature. Half naked guy, wearing Calvin Klein's, all that. But yeah, you're right. It's a lot of experiential that gets shared. What do you think? Here's my hypothesis, right?
Mhm.
I continue to think that it's hard to measure experiential impact, right? And therefore, the math that a lot of people do, CMOs, I'm talking to you, is you get the cost for the big cool activation, and then you divide it by the number of people that are going to be there to experience it. And then it's oftentimes astronomical, and they're like, well, why are we spending $2,000 a person to do this thing where I could run an ad and read, you know what I mean? And it's the wrong math, but I just don't know how do we measure it? Obviously you can talk about impressions and you can create social around it and then you can measure that impressions, but I feel like there needs to be a better universal way to measure the impact of experiential.
There absolutely does. I also often say, someone spending a half hour, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours with your brand, someone like we were talking about earlier, interacting with your brand in a tangible sense, touching it, feeling it. I mean, that is in a way immeasurable. But of course, yes, for the CMOs listening, we have to find a way to measure it. And I feel strongly it has to be by looking at it differently. A traditional ad or brand message is finite. A Super Bowl spot, since it's that time of year and we're we're already talking Super Bowl, even a Super Bowl spot is ultimately finite, but an experience potentially, if we really leaned into the power of it, could be infinite in terms of there's the experience itself, but then the potential content that comes
Right.
out of that and could be used, could be the key to unlocking this so far age-old challenge.
Yeah. My dream is that the experiential can be the big thing in the middle, the hub of a big campaign, right? Because just make something up. We're doing some big, incredible experience somewhere around Super Bowl. I guess it couldn't be Super Bowl, but let's just say some big experience for a brand, right? And then 1,000 people are going to experience it in person, and it's going to be amazing, and they're going to share it. But then we're also going to shoot a spot around it, right? We're going to create a spot around that, right? And the experience happening and the reactions and all those things, right? And now you've kind of like killed two birds with one stone in a way, right? Where you're doing the experiential, but then you're also creating, bigger, not bigger, but you're creating some assets that are going to potentially get even more eyeballs. I feel like I've sort of seen that. Like, I guess the best example is maybe what they did with Gronk. I think it was the last Super Bowl where he was doing the live kick. It wasn't quite, super experiential, but that same idea that they took an experience and then they turned it into, a broadcast piece. Do you foresee that kind of thing happening?
Yes,
More?
I think yes, and it's not just then it becomes the spot. It also potentially could become all kinds of content and messaging. Extensions that come out of that core experience. I predict that we will see more Gronk-like spots at this year's Super Bowl,
Right.
and beyond, because also that's the way brands have to show up today to break through. I mean, you could also look at the example from a few years ago with Tide, if you recall that, and the stain.
Refresh my memory on that.
So they put a stain on Terry. Why am I blanking on his name?
Jerry Bradshaw?
Bradshaw. Thank you. And that stain became the talk of the Super Bowl, or thinking about what the NFL did at its 100th year anniversary. With the kid who they filmed, running.
Running, yeah.
Right. But then he ran live onto the field at the Super Bowl. So if you really start to think about it, more and more quote unquote traditional, advertising is becoming more experiential in nature, which I think is a sign of the times, a proof point of our
You're
hypotheses.
starting to convince me. What about the Pop-Tart thing? I mean, that was all over, you know, and I feel like they did turn it into some kind of quick little spot maybe, but that, that's through and through an experience. So what do you think about something like what Coinbase, I think it was Coinbase, did with the, the moving QR code at the Super Bowl? Because in some ways, would you consider that experiential? Because somebody at home had to participate in that, right? They had to follow along. Would you consider that an experience? And that's Mac, my dog. He's chiming in, giving us his opinion on that.
I'm pretty sure he agrees. Reddit, right? It was Reddit.
I thought it was Coinbase where they were like, you scan the QR code and then they were going to give you like a free, like $50, deposit of crypto or something like that. But, people had to at home activate their cameras, follow the QR code. I mean, in that, would you classify that as experiential?
I mean, I think it's fair to say that that is experiential TV. You have to get up off, the couch, get out your phone, and engage. And if you think about it, that idea um, could potentially make its way out into the world too, and have a lot of legs. So yes, I would.
I love that, and I'm going to trademark that, and I'm going to try to, as soon as we're done here, I'm going to try to beat you to it before you do it. But experiential, how brilliant experiential TV, like how cool is that? And then experiential print and I mean, just adding that,
Social.
right? Think about, it's like now you have an idea of what does that mean? It's an experiential print ad. Well, what does that mean? It means that you're gonna scan something and something's gonna come to life in virtual reality or AR or something, which I know people are doing. But I just love that idea that you can kind of add that word to all the other channels, and suddenly you have a different sort of mashup.
I'll race you.
Well, I'm gonna race you. So, but yeah, I love that. So you're starting to convince me. You're starting to erase the years of hurt that I've had as an experiential creative director. Why do you think you have a premise that experiential is the best place for young creatives to be? Why do you think that?
There are many reasons. One is simply this. I really believe that it is the future of the industry as a whole. So where else would you want to be? Two, and you've experienced this. There's nothing more incredible than getting to see your work come to life in real life. And there's nothing better in terms of a learning experience than seeing how people react to that in real time, what they do, how they engage. So it's an incredible course in the power of marketing for people who are just getting into the business.
Yeah, I agree with you that seeing something that you've dreamt up in your head come to life in a physical, 3D sort of way is very cool. And you're right with you sort of get an immediate response, right? It's something that you probably don't always get if you're creating a TV spot or something. You get that instant feedback, right? If people, walk into your activation or your experience center, eyes are bugging out and they're loving everything and they're loving, the photo op that you've created or the, experience tunnel or whatever it is. That's cool that you get to see that, happen in real time.
or when you see the things they don't interact with and don't engage with, and you often learn as much, if not more, from that.
Yeah. How do you think, let me let Mac out here. Come on, buddy. What do you think? And this kind of maybe goes back to the measurement question. Are there any things that you've done or are doing to better gauge things like that? I know in the past we've tried using these kind of like cell phone trackers, right? That kind of track cell phone activity around us. Let's say we put one near a display or something, and we're able to track, how close did they get? If they got us to a certain distance, then we counted that as like an engagement, and how long did they spend there? And do you do, or is that something that you're interested in, or that you do, or that you see happening more of? That way you can kind of really say, like, this was a hit. This thing, not so much. It didn't get a lot of love. Or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, all of those kinds of tools that track people's interaction, engagement, it's almost akin to when people were super into tracking how people engaged with site content or digital content. It's almost like a heat map of
Right.
engagement. They're certainly powerful. I think I'm more interested in what comes out of the experience and the power of that, because that's where what matters in the experience itself, and is certainly powerful, but how it catches fire and what else comes of it in terms of content, and how people engage with that is where the future really is.
Okay, so what you're saying is you're talking about kind of the, I think at Jack they used to have an expression where it was like, experience by hundreds, but enjoyed by millions. I can't remember what the expression was.
Witnessed by few.
Something like that,
Something
right?
like that.
But is that what you mean? You mean that the real potential is in that the content and the assets and the things that come from it, and exploiting those and measuring those and really blowing those out even further than they have been in the past.
Yes, and getting at how that changes people's minds and behaviors. You and I mean, we all know the power of a moment, something like that is something that sticks in your memory forever. Be it a concert that you went to, or something else that you experienced that really changed how you think, how you feel, and translating that into behavior, consumer behavior, with regard to things like brand loyalty, purchase.
Okay, so now is the time in your mind for creatives to come over to experiential. How would somebody, break into the experiential business in terms of being a creative? How did you land here? Let's start there. Actually, I'd love to know how you got into this crazy business.
That's a great question. I came into experiential from Digitas, so that was where I was right before, and I was intrigued when I got a call from a recruiter, because I'd been at Digitas about 8 years. I started at Digitas right after the iPhone came out.
Wow.
And digital agencies were having, I'd argue, a similar moment to brand experience agencies. The moment that they're in now.
Right.
And as I uncovered the work that Jack and some of its competitors were doing, I fell in love with it. So for me, it was an easy decision, and I think I came at a time where brand experiential agencies were starting to recognize the power of a big idea and creativity, and we're moving from event production
right
into brand experience.
Right. Yeah. Big difference. Right. And that's, I think, a lot where people sometimes get hung up. It's like, well, it's an event. It's a, but it can, and certainly there is a place for that. There is a place for an event, but there's so much more, right? And when you think about it as an experience, it just kind of takes it to a different level. Okay, so how would you go ahead? No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. At the time I came over, when I was with Digipass, they were the AOR for KitchenAid, and I was running that account. And while during my time on that account, was witnessing this shift where we were, again as the AOR, really doing the brand, campaign, holistically 360, and the experiential part of that, which used to be, I'd say on page, 212
Right. Yeah.
of the big deck, was making its way up. um, and for many reasons that we've already talked about why. So that's why I made the move.
Yeah. That's going to be, that is a great way to measure the progress of what we're doing, right? It's like, how far back are we in the deck, or how close how close are we to the front? Because you're right. I mean, typically it's back there, somewhere next to, the .com or something like that. But yeah, I think that's going to be very telling. And I think that you're right that it should start making its way towards the front, if not being at the front every so often, because I do think, that it all depends on what the business challenge is, right? And this is my dream to someday work at an agency or start an agency that is, completely agnostic, that says, hey, tell us what the problem is. We'll take it back to the lab, and we're going to come back to you with a solution. And it may be, we may lead with experiential because we think that that's going to be the best way to communicate with the consumer, or it may be, maybe broadcast, or it may be completely digital, or whatever it is. And, that's just so hard because, as clients want to sort of pigeonhole their agencies, or they want to know what they're going to get with a certain group. But how cool would that be to just say like, hey, we're going to solve the problem, and we'll let you know, we'll come back to you with what we think what it is.
I think you can realize your dream today. I think, another indicator is what's happening with a lot of clients and integrated agency teams, where they're putting a brief and, making it a jump ball. And it's giving the experience agencies a bigger seat at the table. We're all coming to the table together. I experienced that approach with Molson Coors, where they'd put a brief out to each of their agencies in those traditional lanes, but we'd come together to look at ideas. And oftentimes, I'd argue more often than not, it wasn't a film that won the day. It was a brand experience or a brand stunt.
Yeah. Do you categorize? Sorry, I'm jumping around here, but you're bringing up so much good stuff here. Do you consider stunts to be part of the experiential family?
I do, because they check the box on many of the same, traits that we talked about earlier when we talked about what exactly is experiential, and have the legs that we've talked about in terms of. I think I've remembered the phrase witnessed by few, experienced by many.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Experienced by. That's
something
not
like
it
that
either. We'll get it.
We're going to get in trouble from our old friends at Jack for not remembering that. But yeah, it's something like that.
Mhm.
Okay, so back to the question that I had started with. There was, so how would you recommend if somebody wants to make the shift and come over to the A team? What do you, or the E team, I guess, the EXP team? How would you recommend that folks do that? How do they start showing, that they have those chops, or, what would you recommend?
We're looking for people with big ideas. I think
Is this an interview, by the way? I mean, am I interviewing for a job here?
I
Okay.
think you are.
Okay. Hopefully, I do good.
You're doing
Okay,
great so far.
you're looking. Okay, so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just thought it'd be funny. So say that again.
We're looking creatively. We're looking for people with big ideas in their work, and I'm, this is yet another indicator. When I see, portfolios that really get me excited, they have experiential ideas in them, because more often than not, those are the types of ideas that set the world on fire, that everybody talks about, that everybody shares. So I think it's to answer your question, you should not be held back, thinking that you have to have a big event, or a big experience in your work. What you need to show are big ideas.
Yeah, and so you're saying that as portfolios are coming across your desk, you're seeing more inclusion of experiential thinking.
Yeah,
That's
for
great.
sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think, back to your point in this, I'm remembering when I first applied to Jack Morton, I'd never done anything experiential. And I could sense that they, weren't sure if I could do it. And I said, give me a test. Give me a test assignment. And they gave me like a test assignment for a fake new car that was launching. And I, had to come up with the idea and pitch it and all that. But I think it's anybody that can think in terms of a big idea, what is the big idea, can make that transition, right? Because it all comes down to just a big idea, not a tactic. Tactic will fit in there, but it's like, well, what is the big idea that we're trying to? So if you can think in that way, then you can make that pivot, correct?
You can. I think that's true of any pivot
Right.
across our industry. If you can show that if you think that way, yes,
Yeah. And so you came up as a more on the writing side, correct?
I did.
So we
That's
share
my
that
little
in common.
secret. We
Yeah.
do share that in common. I love
Yeah.
that.
And so you think that writers especially have a good sort of are in a good spot to make this transition. Why do you think that?
I do, absolutely. And you experienced it, I'm sure, when you joined Jack. I've certainly experienced it in my transition to experiential. We're still not the norm. There are still not as many writers as there are art directors and designers in the business. Um, but two things. Writers understand big ideas and how to express them. And two, what better place for storytellers? If you think about immersive experiences, for example, where you might be taking an IP from a brand like Netflix, or a new movie, and bringing that to life. Uh, it's the place for storytellers.
Yeah, I love that. And the other thing that I love also about experiential, and I tell people who who are curious about it, what's really cool about it is when you do it right, you will get to use all of your disciplines, right? Like I feel like I'm a pretty I can understand and can work in a lot of different areas. So that's what's really cool about experiential. So you're gonna help create the idea, the big idea, because that's the most important part. But then you're going to maybe help describe what the activation or the experience should feel like, which will then inform what the design is going to be, right? So that's cool as a creative. Then you might also say, well, when people walk into this thing, we're going to need to hit them with this really cool content piece. Cool. Let me figure that out. Let me write that. Right. And it's like, and then we're going to, once they turn the corner, they're going to come across this quote by somebody, or we need to hit them with a really cool statement, manifesto. Well, shit, I can write that. You know what I mean? Like you get to use all your crayons in a way that I feel like in some other disciplines, you don't get to do that.
Yeah, your crayons and your creative side hustles and passions. And then we're going to do this thing with sound or music and
right,
or lighting, or we're going to think about what we're doing in terms of styling and decor and furniture and on and on and on.
Okay, well, here's the thing. Well, actually, let me ask you one more question.
Mm-hmm.
What is your thought on these things that keep popping up, these sort of fake out of home things that are basically depicting experiential concepts, but they're doing it with they're doing it with CGI. So some of those things are like I don't know if you saw those one for a mascara brand, and they put eyelashes on a train, and as a train is pulling it to the station, it goes through the brush and the lashes kind of plump up. Or there was another one with a car that's driving down the street and laying down this beautiful red ribbon. I can't remember what that one was for, but what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I kind of like it, and I see the value, but I don't know. I just feel like it's cheating a little bit.
I love it, and I think it is experiential. Getting back to what we were talking about in terms of experiential TV, let's put the
Okay,
the adjective.
you're
Let's
right.
apply the adjective again in terms of experiential content.
Yeah,
Or really their stunts, their content stunts
yeah.
as well. Uh, I think uh, what is more powerful, is if more comes from that. So if you see that in CGI and in content, like I think it was Maybelline
Yeah.
example, but then you see out there in the real world something that does that, maybe architecturally. That's where it starts to get really interesting.
I love that. So almost like do the thing that you would love to do, but it's next to impossible. Do that thing in CGI, but then maybe do smaller versions of the same big idea, but do them in smaller ways. So now you've created something that caught the imagination of tons of people, and now other people are experiencing little snippets of that same idea on a smaller scale, but you still have in your brain that really big one. I like that. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
And I'm also trademarking tech stunt. That's going that's going in my trademark. you're
You've
like
got a
a
lot of
wealth of these
trademark.
things.
I
You're like a
know.
wealth.
Well, I'm a writer.
Yeah.
I think those kind of things too are really even more interesting when they bring together um, more channels, I guess, if you will. Like another example is Chipotle. If you remember that one, where, for people at, I can't remember what team, uh, but it was at a hockey game, and Zamboni, pushed a big burrito bowl on the ice,
Oh,
and then
really?
a big hand came out and grabbed it and took it back under the ice, and then had left the fork and came back out and grabbed the fork.
That's cool.
So the people there were experiencing some of it. Certainly, people who saw the content after were experiencing it too. That gets even more interesting to me.
Yeah. All right, I'm sold. I'm sold on that too, and I'm sold on the whole thing. Okay, you're making me feel a lot better that it's experiential's time. I buy your premise. I'm sold on it. I'm fully on board with what you're thinking. So I wanted to spend the last few minutes just talking about, what are you seeing? What did you see when you got to NVE? I imagine, like I said, I've had some of the people on the show. I know some of the people there. I know it's a very talented group. Uh, how excited were you to walk in and meet all these folks, and what's the experience been like?
It's been incredible. I I feel like every day is my first day in a really good way, because I'm discovering something new. Talking to someone new that really excites me. What NVE gets more than anyone, which is so important to what we're talking about today, is culture, and how to show up. The other thing they really get because of their history is entertainment. That's the thing we haven't talked on the nose about yet. I mean, that's another thing that speaks to the power of experience
Yeah,
and why it is going to be at the center of the marketing mix. I
yeah,
haven't actually uttered those words yet.
yeah,
Why we're in, as Adweek said, in its coverage of their experiential awards. Experiential is in its Renaissance era. uh, because it's entertaining. So NV's done a lot in terms of working with studios and other entertainment, brands, um, and that combination, entertainment plus culture. Plus NV's superpower of independence is why I'm here and why every day feels like a first day in a really good way.
yeah. And tell us a little bit, just kind of about, you know, going back to our crayons analogy. What is because I know, again, from experience, that you guys have a pretty broad range of tools and people and disciplines. What is sort of the full gamut of what you guys are doing over there?
Yeah, we describe ourselves as full service creative marketing agency that specializes in experience. So we have the people who can come up with the wild ideas, the strategists who unlock them, but then also, as you know, from having been at an experiential agency, um, the superpower of the people who can make them happen, who can, make something that you can drop from a building or see from outer space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. Well, Shelly, thank you so much for making the time to be on the show. Congratulations on the big, let's do another cheer here. Congratulations on, again, the big Adweek Experiential Executive of the Year. Oh, I just triggered it again. Congratulations on that, because again, that is a big deal. Congratulations on your big move over to NVE. I'm looking forward to continuing our new friendship. I feel like we're kindred spirits, and I look
Yeah.
forward to seeing all the great stuff that you do. And just thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I really believe this is the first of many because we have, we're talking the truth.
I love,
This is
I
the
love it.
future. So I think I'll be back, as
Yes,
will many of my peers.
I love it. I love it. I'm waving the experiential flag. I'm with you. Let's do this thing. All right. Well, we will talk soon. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.
And that's going to do it for another episode of Confessions of a Creative Director. Thanks to my very special guest and new friend, Shelly Elkins. That was a great episode, one that's near and dear to my heart. And I'm convinced maybe this is the time for experiential marketing, brand experience to be at the center of the marketing mix. I'm crossing my fingers. Thank you, Shelley, for sharing all your wisdom with us. Hey, folks, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform. Follow me on LinkedIn to receive updates on the latest episodes, as well as cut downs and all kinds of great information. Become a paid supporter of all my efforts on patreon.com/confessions of a creative director. You can also support the podcast on Spotify, so check that out. And last but not least, pick up a copy of my book, What's the Big Idea? An Indispensable Guide to Becoming a Kick-Ass Creative Director, available on Amazon, on Audible, anywhere that you find audiobooks. You should be able to find that. All right, folks, until next time, peace, love, and creativity. See ya.